We're now live. Good afternoon and welcome to the Dr. Kenneth D podcast. My name is Dr. Kenneth Daniels and the Dr. Kenneth D podcast is sponsored by the Daniels Foundation for Impact Investments and Development. And this afternoon we have a great introductory guest, which is Mondo Lee. Mondo from East Orange. How you doing, Mondo?
I'm doing pretty good, Kenny. How you doing?
Doing fine. And thank you for agreeing to do the interview. And so to educate our guests, why don't you kind of give a little bit background of, your formal education, some of your job experiences, and what you've been doing lately?
Sure, yeah, sure. And thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. You inviting me. So as you said, I'm a native of East Orange. Grew up, I believe, a few blocks away from you, not too far away. Went to the same schools, I believe. Went to Washington School, learned in El Davie, East Orange High School. After that, I moved on to Rutgers University for undergrad. And about a year after, I took a year or so off to work, and then I went to Howard University School of Law. Graduated from there, became a practicing attorney, worked initially, my first job out of law school was with the city of Newark as a litigator. I did civil defense litigation and did that for a few years. It was a lot of fun. Got to get into the courtroom, had some jury trials, really interesting experience. But then I just, from a money perspective, it wasn't all that great. So I transitioned over to a corporate legal practice, working primarily in insurance at Prudential, Guardian Life. I was there for 11 years. Then I've been at Horizon, United Healthcare, and some other stops. And I'm currently have my own firm, the Lee Legal Group. We focus primarily on corporate transactional work, small businesses, any type of regulatory stuff, primarily or a lot of it's in the area of healthcare, working with doctors, provider groups, things like that, but really just general a corporate practice. And in addition to my education, I also have I went back after law school and got a master's in public health from Columbia University. So I have a background in public health as well.
Wow, that's pretty impressive, man. I'm very, very proud of you. I lived around the corner from you on Edgar Street, and you were on Irvington.
Yes.
It's an amazing amount of talent that came out of the old neighborhood. So I actually am recircling back and getting a lot of people. I'm gonna try to get Rob Everett and some other people. And so the Edgar Street Irvington block did very well. So it's kind of almost tap indirectly. Can you talk about your experience of growing up in East Orange and how the town influenced you, and maybe some of the neighborhood stuff, or what growing up in a predominantly Black town, how did that kind of impact your thinking?
Yeah, man, I tell everybody, man, that was the greatest experience in the world, growing up in East Orange, like when we did in the in the 70s and even early 80s, where you had just such a supportive community. And like you said, there were so many, you're a little older than me, and there were so many guys like you, my brother, who were role models to everyone, and it extended all the way down to, my little league coach was Steve Cowens, who, Dr. Cowens, who, worked in high school. And so, he was like one of the early influences on me. And just, I think it being an all Black community at that time, you can't overstate the importance of that, the value of that, of being a positive Black community. There were issues, of course, like anywhere else, but by and large, I had a great upbringing, and I've always credited, East Orange with being the backbone, rather, of what I've become, without a doubt.
That's fantastic. That's kind of what this showcase is trying to draw some of these people back in to maybe do some mentorship and kind of go through the foundation to reconnect. So we appreciate your support.
Okay, yeah.
Let me keep going. So, what kind of student were you in high school? And can you name a person that influenced you in a significant way?
Yeah, so I probably wasn't the best student in high school, believe it or not. I know it's funny, a lot of people think that, I was this really super smart guy in high school, but my grades definitely didn't reflect that. I was pretty middle of the road in terms of grades. I did very good on standardized tests. So I did real good on my SATs. I did good on those, I forget those tests they used to give us, those ones, what are they called?
Aptitude tests, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like every couple of years they would give you a test, something like that. I always did good on those things. But I could have done better as a student if I applied myself more. And that's funny because you had asked about like who had an influence. And I was thinking of my English teacher, I think it was my junior year, Blodgett, Malcolm Blodgett.
Yeah, Mr. Blodgett.
Yeah, he actually, and the reason why I say he was an influence is I remember, I think it was my junior or senior year, he had convinced me to participate in this poetry reading contest. That was a statewide poetry reading contest. And I represented East Orange in it. And I remember, I would go after school, practice with them and got down and everything. And then it was like a day or so before the contest. It was on a Saturday, I remember that. And some guys were like clowning me about being in a poetry contest. and I went to the contest. I think it was at King College. And I kind of phoned it in. I didn't do my best, because I was like, oh man, this is corny. I shouldn't be doing this. And I didn't come in, didn't finish too good. And I remember talking to Mr. Blodgett that next Monday, and he was so upset. He was more upset at it than I was. And that really just struck me like, wow, this guy, here it is. He felt like maybe it was like a racial thing that I didn't. And I'm thinking, you know what? I didn't want to tell him. I just, I did it half-assed. But at the time, it occurred to me because, he was an older white man, and he really, I think, kind of cared about it, a little more than I did. And that really struck me. And I was like, ever since then, I'm like, if you're going to do something, don't half-ass it. Don't, just, you got to do it, So that was really a real lesson for me.
Yeah, eye-opening. Well, that's interesting. I like that story. So, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is that you're a lawyer. And before we kind of jump into, kind of the general law questions of the day that are on people's mind, what kind of lawyer are you so people know, and what are some of the highlights of your career or work that you've done over time? And do you have any professionally things that you regret?
Yeah, so I'm like I said, I'm a corporate attorney. I do mostly transactional stuff. I do a lot of regulatory stuff, primarily with insurance companies. It's been, let's say a highlight of my career is that when I was at Guardian Life, that's the place I was at the longest for 11 years. In addition to being a lawyer, I was a lobbyist as well. And I did a lot of work around the Affordable Care Act. So we were actually very involved in lobbying for on the Affordable Care Act to get certain language in there that we felt would be favorable to our company. And we actually were able to get in, and I'm, in all honesty, I spearheaded the effort of getting in the provision of pediatric dental benefit into the final version of the law. Did a lot of work on that. We did some, we worked with Senator Schumer, Gillibrand, a whole bunch of other people. We ended up getting like about 40 signatures from Democratic senators to support that piece being included. And it was ultimately included in the final version. And that was solely, not solely, but it was originated at Guardian by me and, my boss, and definitely carried through by us. So, I mean, that's something I've always been proud of because, that's still in the law to this day.
Wow, that's not, that's interesting. So go ahead, keep going.
Yeah. So in terms of regret, though, I kind of regret landing in insurance because it's not the most exciting area of law. And looking back, I'm thinking, I would love to have maybe done something in like entertainment, sports, even civil rights stuff. That's when I first went to law school was what I thought I was going to try to do is some civil rights, become like a NAACP, legal defense fund kind of attorney, that kind of thing. And, as you probably know, man, sometimes you get sidetracked and then the next thing you look up, it's been 15, 20 years and, it's a whole different ballgame,
I wanted to be a lawyer and I turned out to be a finance professor. So, it just,
there you go.
Years and then you got a family. After that, you got some other priorities. Well,
exactly.
Great work. So let's keep it moving. So you never know. You never know that maybe when, like me, I retired, right? And I never thought I'd be a writer. I always wanted to, write, just general stuff. I was always a scientific writer. And so maybe retirement would be, a second career. You can do what you want.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's never too late. You always have a chance to start over, right? Or do something. Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So with that as background, we now know that currently we have the Black Lives Matters movement and it's captured the attention of America. Can you speak about the ability of the movement to pressure legislative or legal environment to foster change that's beneficial for Black America?
I think it has a lot of potential, particularly now, with the different administration coming in, if it's done right. I think we saw it during the, the pandemic and after the George Floyd incident, how people started paying attention. They realized after seeing that thing, with George Floyd on tape, that, we haven't been making this stuff up all these years, that it's a real situation in Black communities. I do think, however, the risk is, and I just want to put this delicately, you don't want to overplay your hand. I mean, America, particularly white America, is known for backlash. I mean, that's how we ended up with Trump in the first place after Obama. Right. So you don't want to, you just have to be strategic about it. But I think I think it's great, first off, that Black Lives Matter is making all this noise and has garnered the support. Now the key is to keep it, and the key is to, like you said, translate it or transform it into a meaningful change. Getting real legislation passed in terms of police reform. I don't think personally that this whole defund the police thing. First off, I don't know what that means exactly. Defund the police. I mean, I think you need to reform the police. I think you need to have better training. I think you honestly need to have much better screening in terms of who's allowed to become a police officer, given the power that they hold. But I mean, defunding, I'm not even sure what that means exactly. I don't think it's helpful in terms of reform. Because
I was talking to somebody out of LA that kind of was familiar with this, and they said that from a strategic standpoint, they don't quite understand how Black Lives Matter actually is using that language, because it's controversial and almost counterproductive right from the beginning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're
getting at, how can you have something talking about defund the police? Because clearly you can't do that across the board. You can't defund everything. Now, I think like in the case of something like LA, or let's say New York, you could defund and take away millions of dollars. But if you go down to Podunk County, you can't take away, sniffing dollars, because the impact would just be too great. So.
Right. And then also, in terms of defunding the police, does that really get at the problem? I mean, if you took away all the money from you take away half the budget of the Minneapolis Police Department, that guy's still going to do what he did to George Floyd. So it's not a money issue. It's a police issue. It's a person issue. It's the people who are actually doing the policing who need to understand that they can't do that. I mean, that's really what the issue is. And so I think what would be much more effective is if we saw real serious punishment for these actions. Like if those guys get life in prison, anytime a cop does something like that, violating your civil rights, they actually get a real sentence, which almost never happens. If that starts happening, then people are going to cut that out, I think,
Right. Yeah, no, it's kind of interesting. So we kind of know that, this police reform is coming along. But we don't really know how. So yeah, Mondo, sorry for that initial break there, but why don't you continue to talk about Black Lives Matters?
So, like I was saying, I think it's good to see that the movement is developed. I think to be more effective, they probably the movement needs to just kind of fine tune some of the things they're doing, sharpen the rhetoric. Like we were saying earlier, the whole defund the police is just not productive. There's better language that can be used that would really convey, what they're trying to get to. The fact is, you want to reform police departments. We got to move away from the model that's been in existence for so many years in this country of just really, brutalizing and treating, communities, minority communities as inferior. We just got to move away from that. And the way you move away from it, I think, is the best way to modify behavior is to have, very severe penalties for going outside of that behavior. Like I said, if police officers got 30, 40, 50 years for these types of actions, then you probably would see a decrease in it, I think.
Let me tackle that. So in implementing something like that, let me kind of profess my ignorance because I'm not sure. So usually we think of things coming from either top down, from federal down, or bottom up from local up. And then if there's any inconsistency, it might come to some type of Supreme Court saying that this is what is valid or not valid. What do you think is more effective in terms of police reform? Because you could have 50 different states implementing 50 different reforms, or we could have one unified federal, law come down and say this is how the law of the land. What should be whether it should be decentralized or centralized? I think that's one way to think about how reform could be implemented.
You can have both. I mean, you do have both really, because you can have every state's going to have its own laws, but you do have a federal overlay. So for example, you remember in 92 with Rodney King, those police officers, they were all acquitted by a California court, but then the federal government, the Justice Department, brought charges on civil rights violations. So you can do that, and then they were convicted. I think at least two of them were, if I remember correctly. So you can have that, but I do think the way we're set up is that the laws are more, criminal laws are more prevalent at the state level, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it. So you're going to always have some differences in state. However, and this is something that I know under the Obama administration they started, you can have guidelines that are promulgated by the federal government that states can implement. You can also have an active Justice Department that makes sure that things are like they were back in the 50s and 60s, where a white man couldn't be convicted of killing a black person. So you have mechanisms to kind of bring that about.
That's interesting. So we'll have to look for that.
Yeah.
Keep building on this this penal system kind of idea or reform. So, the penal system is large. It's federal, it's state, it's local. It has many components. So can you discuss some of those components that you feel could be improved, or discuss ways that the penal system could be innovated in terms of using technology or best practices?
So I'm not an expert on it, but I mean, I do have, something of an opinion. I think the first thing you can do to improve it is, have non-violent offenders kind of removed from the same environment as violent offenders, right? Mm-hmm. You got people doing time now for possession of marijuana or whatever that are in the same facility as, hardened criminals, murderers and rapists and, all that kind of stuff. So that just can't be helpful in terms of rehabilitation, right? Yeah. So, maybe we put more of an emphasis in our penal system on reform and rehabilitation rather than just warehousing people, because it just doesn't do anyone any good to just lock someone up and not have them be productive for X amount of years and then expect them to come out and, go back to getting a job. It's hard to get a job as a convict in many places, can't vote in many places. So how are you really going to have that person, reintegrate into society if you haven't helped them at all along the way? So I think, and that's at the federal and the state level. State prisons, as far as I'm aware, are probably not as enlightened or as good as federal prisons, I guess. For lack of a better way to put it, particularly down south, you look at like Angola, Louisiana, Mississippi. That's basically just plantation work they're doing down there,
Right. Okay, interesting. So let's jump into some, current cases. Breonna Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
So, many people were shocked by the verdict.
Yeah.
So can you discuss the rationale for the outcome of the case, and how could the verdict been different using a different approach?
Yeah, well, from what I've read and understand, I don't think a good effort was made to actually get a conviction or get an indictment rather by that attorney general. I think he's a young brother actually out in Kentucky. Right. He's a Republican though, but I don't think there was really a good effort made there, because from everything I've heard, it was a no-knock warrant and they just fired, wantonly into this person's apartment. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't seem to me, I can't think of a rationale for justification of that. They're saying, well, the boyfriend had a gun and maybe shot, but I think he was within his rights to shoot. If someone's knocking on my door, I don't know who's going on. If they didn't announce themselves as police officers, and my understanding is that's in dispute, then, he was within his rights to defend his property. Mm-hmm. So those things are tricky because the problem is that every benefit of the doubt is given to law enforcement in those instances. It's not like if you came to my door, like, Dr. Daniels, you came to my door at 4 a.m. and started knocking, and I fire, and you may fire very well in self-defense, but no one's going to give you that benefit of the doubt, because you're not a law enforcement person. So I think, frankly, the way you come up with more just decisions is that you have to look at police officers as any other person. And so you gotta, you just can't say that they have these special benefits and special rights, I think. So that's the way I look at it. But it's a tough case. I think there at least should have been some type of reckless and I mean, some kind of charge. I don't know if you get a murder charge, because that would have been tough under the law to get a murder indictment, but you should have been able to get some of those lesser offenses should have been charged, I think.
So do you think if this case had been tried, let's say under different federal administration, this was under the Trump, so kind of go back to this whole federal overlay that you mentioned. So would there have been any, if it had been under a more Democratic administration, would you think the federal, given that the verdict was not pretty much what we expected at the local level, you think the federal might have come back with some type of indictment or oversight of interjection into the case at all?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, it would be a different Justice Department. I mean, I'm certain under Attorney General Holder, he would have taken a different look at it and would have looked at it, a little closer at the evidence. My understanding is there were some flaws in the warrant that they had anyway, even though it's a no-knock warrant. My understanding is the information that the warrant was based on was flawed, kind of setting this whole thing up, setting into motion the whole, deadly consequence. So yeah, I think so. I think if I mean, obviously William Barr didn't give it to him. He wasn't going to look at it. So if you had someone better in that place, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So let's go to another case that was in the news just a while back and also had a big impact nationally, was the Trayvon Martin case. And I like to think of this one in a different vein because I think we kind of know what, the case is the case and we don't know the details and who knows what that, but the focus this is that, after we think about the case, can African Americans feel that when they interact with the justice system that they can expect justice? So here's a case, another case that, and I'm just saying, we can't really get a specific of the case, but that as an example of, well, should we expect justice or do we have to, pressure for justice in terms of resources and things like that? What is necessary of interaction with the justice system so that the probabilities are more in our favor is kind of pointing the question. So, the Trayvon Martin case, another case drew national attention. So again, what do you think of that verdict and how can we kind of look at the outcome of these legal cases in terms of, is it justice for them or just not for us?
Yeah, I thought the outcome was ridiculous. I mean, the guy who was Zimmerman killed the kid in cold blood for no apparent reason. And, self-defense didn't hold water in that instance. I mean, you're a bigger, older man with a gun and a defenseless teenage kid, and you just shoot him down. I mean, it's horrific. And something like that does lead you to believe that, can you really get justice? I mean, yeah, it's the reality is that prosecutors have incredible power to gain convictions. As I think we all know, people can be convicted of anything if they don't have the resources to fight back and if the prosecution really wants to. So in this instance, I don't think the prosecution, not knowing, everyone and everything, I don't know if their heart was really into getting a conviction here, because Zimmerman clearly, in my opinion, did not act in self-defense, and that the outcome should have been differently. I will raise even a more egregious case. I don't know if you remember the kid, Tamir Rice in Cleveland.
Oh yeah, I remember that one, yeah.
12-year-old boy playing with a toy gun in the park, and the video shows the police officer pulls up, jumps out of his car and kills him. Doesn't say anything, doesn't give him any command. He jumps out of his car and shoots him dead, a 12-year-old boy. And that cop was in charge. Right. And I don't know how the hell that happened. I mean, it was clearly an execution of a 12-year-old boy playing in a park. And, so that makes you wonder. It's like, how can you get a fair shake if that's not, indictable, if that's not, if that cop doesn't go to jail, I don't know who does, right? I mean, it's just crazy.
Because I think it is an issue, because I think that not only for, African Americans, but I think anyone that once you know that you're going to court, I think it strikes a lot of fear in a lot of people about, well, one, do I understand the process? Am I going to be treated fairly? Do I have a good lawyer? I think all these things we know has an impact. And so, essentially, we have to we have to kind of, deal with that. So, we have to really, kind of wonder if, as we interact with the law system, the system of law of fairness, race, culture, privilege, and studies show that these things matter. It's been scientifically proven that, if you do a regression on these things, these are factors that matter in terms of the outcome of the case. And so speak to some of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a lot of biases implicit and explicit in the system. I mean, the equalizer, of course, is money, right? I mean, we saw that with OJ. I mean,
Right.
he got the best lawyers money could buy, and he won. You
Yep.
know, so unfortunately, not all of us have those same resources. So, and that's not to knock. And this is something I've always found a little offensive, is that a lot of people in the Black community in particular knock public defenders. I mean, those people are doing God's work. They just don't have the resources necessarily to do what needs to be done sometimes. But public defenders, by and large, are incredibly disciplined and dedicated people who are really, really working and really care about what they're doing. By and large, obviously there are some that don't care, but I'd say 95% of them really, really care. A lot of them make almost no money whatsoever, and they're doing that, where they could be making a lot more money doing something else.
Right. Oh,
But having said that, and actually a good documentary on that is called Gideon's Army. It's about public defenders in the Deep South doing capital cases.
I heard about that. Gideon's a Black lawyer, right? Yeah.
It comes from the Gideon v. Wainwright. That was a Supreme Court case that gives us the right to remain silent. Gideon v. Wainwright. It was decided in 1960 something, I think. But these cats are like working round the clock, making like $20,000 a year, working death penalty cases. You know, I mean, it's really crazy. Right. So just wanted to put that plug in for public defenders. But getting back to what you're saying, I mean, the whole system, the whole process has just so much bias in it that it is hard to overcome. So, I mean, honestly, my advice is just to stay out of it in the first place. You know, just don't get caught up in it in the first place. Because once you're in, man, it's tough. It's an uphill battle.
Yeah. It's a system. You gotta, you take your chances.
Yep, absolutely.
So let's go more general about law now. And maybe you could talk, you just mentioned a case there. Maybe you could talk about some more cases that kind of, like that cite you in terms of, I have a friend that's a constitutional lawyer. And so, types of law, different, you kind of alluded to some of that earlier. So can you talk about your passion for the law and what you want to accomplish in the future of the law? And you kind of, mentioned some of that, but and maybe if it's like a case that in graduate school that excited you, something that really turned you on the law, what kind of got your stoked the fire?
Just, so like I said, I went to Howard, and that's the alma mater of Thurgood Marshall, who, decided Brown v. Board of Education, a lot of the other desegregation cases. So that was something that initially got me really, into understanding how the law can really change things for the better, hopefully. I would say more recently, though, the Citizens United case, which I think was decided about 8 years ago, that basically was a Supreme Court case that allowed for unlimited money to be poured into political campaigns and stuff like that. It's really, to me, one of the main reasons why we are where we are today, because now you have these multi-million-dollar entities that can influence not only elections, but how we even look at issues, running endless campaigns, endless ads, all of this stuff. So I think that was a very serious case that I think, it gets attention, but it could probably get more attention. And it's something that Congress probably needs to address and kind of change the laws to not allow unlimited contributions and unlimited money to flow into these political campaigns from basically corporations and other special interest groups.
Right. That's interesting. So what do you think about, we a lot of TV shows on lawyers,
Yeah.
Law and Order, stuff. And so, I think a lot of people's perception of law are driven by these shows. What do you think about? And, I know I've worked with lawyers, and, every time I talk to them, the clock is running tick, 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 and I get a bill, So what do you think, what can the law profession do in terms of its perception? Are you okay the way that you're perceived on TV? No, I'm talking, it's not corporate law per se, but, just a general idea of law and lawyers. It's easily depicted because it's all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. So my brother, one of my brothers, Russell, always says that I don't know if he's a doctor, but he's always saying that he could be a lawyer because he watches Law and Order every night. So, okay, I wish it was that easy.
Yeah,
he's always saying that. But yeah, I mean the perception, it's interesting with lawyers because we are perceived a lot. First off, a lot of people think lawyers are automatically liars and dishonest and doing this, that, and the other thing. And I understand that perception. That's been around since, I guess, Shakespeare, right? I think he said,
Yeah.
kill all the lawyers, whatever.
Yeah.
It's been around for hundreds of years. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm personally offended by it because I am, quite frankly, the most honest person I know. So
Yeah.
I know I know I don't fit that stereotype, right? So, but it's just entertainment. I think some of the shows are kind of silly in the way they're resolved. Like Law and Order, I don't really particularly dig that, but I mean, there have been some shows. I used to like what was it, L.A. Law, I guess, back in the 90s with remember it was Blair Underwood and some other people.
Right, Blair, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty good show, and that was actually a focus on corporate law. I mean, although it dealt more with like the relationships and not actually law, but I mean, there's some good shows out there, but you know, it's all entertainment. You know,
Well, the one that really moved me, and I thought that kind of depict lawyers in a good sense was the Aaron Brockovich movie.
Oh, yeah.
And that way, you know, what clearly, I think what it did is that it shows that lawyers are sometimes financially vested in the case, and that they're going against, like in that case, they were suing, the oil companies, and so it kind of showed a different spin on it. And I think that was interesting in terms of her role, and another one I think was really, really interesting for me is The Good Wife. I don't know if you ever saw that show.
No, I didn't. I heard of it. I've not seen it though.
The Good Wife was really interesting because it showed the personal interaction with the law firm in terms of their personal life relative to the law firm, and how the law firm, is the politics of law within the firm. Like you have your own firm, and so I don't know if you want to speak to that, but there is politics, just like any organization. There's politics, but is it any different for law firms, the politics of dealing with law, or is it pretty much the same? Politics.
More cutthroat, given the fact that lawyers are who they are.
Yeah, and that's it. They would go at each other, because they
lawyers are
they were skilled in the mindset of attack.
Yeah, well, you know what it is that people don't become that way because they're lawyers. People become lawyers because they are that way. That's what I saw. Like in law school, you had a lot of very, very confident people, just to put it politely,
right?
And probably overly confident. So you just go at it all the time. I mean, I kind of miss some of that, just the intellectual debates and everything. But so that translates into the real world once you get into a law firm, once you get into other things where you still have that mindset. And unfortunately, sometimes people take it to extremes, and so you become this cutthroat, person that maybe is not very likable. So you see that a lot,
Got it. So, we're kind of coming up on our deadline here, but, you mentioned your firm. So, but in general, what are some of your hopes? Let's talk about Jennifer. What are some of your hopes for Black America as we enter the year 2021? And then what are some of your hopes for you personally?
Well, for Black America, I mean, just, like I said, just we were talking about with the Black Lives Matter, the whole George Floyd incident being a catalyst for maybe some real change. I think, getting a new administration in, hopefully they do the right thing. And, we don't forget about it after a few months, like we often do in America. And so maybe, we'll see some real opportunity. I know something like, for example, that's of interest to you is in terms of, access to capital, wealth building and stuff like that in the Black community. People getting an opportunity to, do businesses and stuff. And one of the things I thought was real good that came out of all of this stuff is you're seeing a lot more, like I see it on Facebook, for example, there's like a Black-owned businesses group in Facebook where people are really, I think, getting a little more serious now about working together, about building up businesses in the community, stuff like that. I think that's awesome. And I hope to see that continue in 2021. I hope we just don't forget about it and say, go back to business as usual. Right. So that will be for the community. For me, I mean, I just want to keep on keeping on, keep moving, keep developing in my career. I have 2 young boys. I want to see them keep growing and getting bigger and stronger and better. My oldest is a freshman in college. I have a son who's a sophomore in high school also. Just want to, see them keep doing well. And, and for my family too, family, friends, loved ones, just, hopefully everything's good.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Mon, I want to thank you. That's a nice note to end on. And I want to thank you again from the Daniels Foundation for supporting us and the things that we do. You mentioned the whole idea of wealth building. And for those folks out there in the Facebook land or the internet in general, you can go to the Daniels-foundation.org to support interviews like this. You know, I think they're very candid. You get to hear different mindsets of a professional like Mondo. We bring that to you. So I'd like to maybe, you know, just give you the last couple minutes here to take us out in terms of just speaking to people generally, say, you know, thank you, or just focusing on like the general audience. What would you like to say?
Yeah, sure. I just want to say thanks again. I think this has been a great conversation. And, you know, I know we've discussed the Daniels Foundation in the past. I mean, I've known you and your family, you know, as you know, I went to school with your brother, grew up with your brother, younger brother. And so, you know, I know all the other good people, and, you know, anything I can do to help and support, man, you know, I would definitely, you know, want to do it. And, you know, stuff like that is important, what you're doing, you know, getting, you know, it's just important. It's important work. I mean, there's no other way to put it, right?
Right.
So definitely be behind it.
Well, I appreciate that. Tell the family hello. And I will say something, people that don't know the Lee family, is that there are 3 Lee brothers. So you mentioned your brother, is it Robert, correct? Russell, yeah. Mondo, and Elliot. And 3 fantastic Black men. And you guys are a model really for the community in terms of all you're doing well. As you mentioned, Russell is a doctor, you're a lawyer. Elliot's doing some great things in technology and security stuff. So from the Daniels family, just you're very proud of you guys, and you represented, you know, not only yourself well, but East Orange well. And I just want to thank you for continuing to, you know, be a model of excellence. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Thanks. And you too, man. I mean, you're no slouch at all either. So
you just keep on, as you say, just keep striving.
Yeah,
so,
thank
you very much, and see you on the other side.
All right, man. Thank you. Take care.
Yep.